Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this webinar for the two-pot system for the eJoburg Retirement Fund. As you'll see from the agenda, we'll first explain the whole two-pot system, and then we'll cover how to make a savings pot withdrawal, the importance of member data, because that's critical to making a withdrawal, and then the further communication that's open to members. In terms of the workshop, this only applies to eJoburg members. The legislation and a lot of what we cover applies to all retirement funds in South Africa, be they pension funds, provident funds, preservation funds, retirement annuity funds. But some of the detail that we'll give tonight only applies to eJoburg. So if you're a member of another fund, for instance, some of the legacy funds at the City, the CJPF, the MEPF, the MGF, then some of this may not apply exactly to your fund, and you'll need to approach your fund to find that out. But a lot of the general information will apply to all funds. A couple of important issues just to start off with. A concern that quite a few members have had is, are their existing benefits protected? Are they not going to be able to take these benefits if they resign? And the answer is no, that is not a problem. All your existing benefits that you've built up to 31st of August 2024, the end of this month, are fully protected with exactly the same rights as now. So at the moment you've got the right to take them in cash on resignation, you will still have the right to take them in cash on resignation. So it's only new money after 1 September where these two-pot restrictions will apply. So those people that have been worrying should they resign and take their benefits, they don't need to because they are protected. And we'll go through this in more detail later in the presentation. We'll see there are restrictions on some of the two-pot money and some options, but that's really only in respect to any contributions after the 1st of September. What's very important is that your data held by the fund must be correct. And why that is if you want to make a savings pot withdrawal, then we need to know that it's you that's actually asking for it and not somebody else that's fraudulently coming forward and trying to take your benefit. And the only way we can do that is to make sure that the data that you provide when you want the withdrawal matches the data that's held in the fund. And we'll go into quite a lot of detail on that. And it's going to be quite important for some people to get that data corrected with the fund. Let's look at the two-pot. It will commence on the 1st of September, literally a couple of weeks away. The two pieces of legislation that are required to allow it to commence have both been passed by Parliament and signed into law by the State President. The one is changes to the Income Tax Act, and the other is changes to the Pension Funds Act. So from that aspect, it will definitely commence on 1 September. What the fund is still waiting for is approval of the rule amendments to actually allow the fund to implement two-pot and make payments. The rules were passed and done by the trustees in June, so quite a while ago, and one of the first done in the country, but we're still awaiting the regulatory authority, which is the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, to provide those rule amendments and the approval of them. We're fairly confident we'll get them by the end of August, but obviously if we don't, then it may be delayed slightly for eJoburg, but the FSCA, the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, has committed that they will get them to us by the end of the month, and we hope they'll stick with that commitment. What is the important part of two-pot? For many people, it's this issue that they can take some of their retirement money in cash, and that's taken in cash without leaving employment. And that's really all the noise around 30,000 Rand, and everybody's wondering when they can get their portion of it. And we'll get into quite a lot of detail on that. So what can you take in cash? And the answer is it's not 30,000 Rand. It might be, or it could be less. The amount you can take from your savings pot will be the seeding capital, which is what it's been called, which will be 10% of your fund credit on the 31st of August 2024, subject to a maximum of 30,000 Rand. So if your fund credit in the fund is 300,000 Rand or more, then 10% will be 30,000 Rand or more and subjected to the maximum of 30,000 Rand. That will go into your savings pot on the 1st of September. But if your fund credit is less, perhaps because you only joined eJoburg fairly recently, then you may not have as much as 30,000 Rand initially in your savings pot. So if your fund credit is, say, 200,000 Rand, 10% will be 20,000 Rand, and that is how much will go into your savings pot, not 30,000 Rand. And that's quite important because people seem to think it's 30,000, and it's not 30,000 Rand every year. This is once off. It's an initial amount simply to put something into your savings pot on day one. So if you want to draw money soon, there's some money there. Because the real money that will flow into your savings pot will be 1/3 of your retirement contributions after the 1st of September. So, for instance, our member has contributions each month of, say, 6,000 Rand for an easy number. 1/3 of 6,000 Rand is 2,000 Rand. 2,000 Rand will go into her savings pot in September, another 2,000 in October, another 2,000 in November, December, and onwards. Obviously, if her salary increases, it'll go up slightly as well. That will build or rebuild the savings pot if somebody takes their initial amount. So for this member, let's say she had a fund credit of more than 300,000 Rand. So on the 1st of September, 30,000 Rand, the 10%, but a maximum of 30,000 Rand, will go into a savings pot. At the end of September, her September contribution of 2,000, a third of 6,000, will go into a savings pot. It'll earn return. That's 1,000 Rand. So her savings pot has now gone from 30,000 plus the 2,000, 32,000, plus the 1,000 Rand of return, 33,000. She goes through October, another 2,000 Rand of contribution. Let's make it easy, another 1,000 Rand of investment return. The 33 becomes 35 with the contribution, becomes 36 with the investment return. So if she wants and doesn't take it immediately, she could now come forward and take the 36,000 Rand. Because another misconception is you can only take 30,000 Rand. That is not the case. You can take however much is in your savings pot at the point in time you want to take it. That lady, if she leaves it for 3 or 4 years, could end up with 250,000 Rand in her savings pot because it's grown monthly and with return and contributions. If she left it and came forward at that point, she could take the full 250,000 Rand in cash. So there's no limit other than what you've got in your savings pot. Remember, for our other member that had only 200,000, initial amount of 10% would be 20,000. He could only take 20,000 because that is the amount initially in his savings pot. Obviously, if he leaves again, it'll grow going forward and he can take whatever's in there. So that's really how this savings pot will work, is you can take whatever amount is in there, or a less amount if you wish, at any point in time. Government doesn't want small amounts because we'll see later SARS has to do a tax directive each time you claim it. There's an administration fee and it wouldn't make sense to allow people to come forward and take, say, 100 Rand. So what they've done is to say that the minimum amount that you can take is 2,000 Rand. So our lady had the 36,000. She could take anywhere between 2,000 Rand and 36,000, but she couldn't come forward and ask for 1,800. If another member's just joined, so he's only been with eJoburg for a month or two, and he's only built up 1,500 Rand, he will not be able to take a withdrawal immediately because it's less than the 2,000 Rand. Obviously, he waits a few months, it'll grow to more than 2,000 Rand, and at that point he can come forward and take that withdrawal. What will happen is whatever amount you take, if you take it, will be taxed as income. And that's taxed as income in your hands. Easiest way to think of it is really going to be treated by SARS as though it's extra salary to you. So it's extra salary during the tax year and therefore taxed almost as part of your salary as income. What that also means is the tax will be different for everyone because it'll depend on your income in the year. And if you're different to somebody else, higher or lower, then you will either have a higher or lower tax rate as well. And we'll talk quite a lot to that because it's quite important. That tax will be deducted from whatever you have requested, and you'll get the net amount. But the amount will also be reduced by an administration fee, because there's quite a lot of work involved in doing the processing, getting tax directors, making the payment, and the funds administrator, whose Momentum, has confirmed that that administration fee will be 250 Rand. That 250 applies no matter how much you withdraw. If you only withdraw 2,000 Rand, the fee is 250 Rand. If in our other example, the lady managed to draw 250,000 Rand, the fee would be 250 Rand. So it's a fixed fee irrespective of how much you withdraw, because the work is the same irrespective of how much you withdraw. Another requirement of SARS, because they don't want to do multiple tax directives for someone, is that you may only withdraw once in a tax year. The tax year runs from the 1st of March to the end of February the following year. So you can only do one withdrawal in that 12-month period. As an example, our member comes forward in April 2025. She takes or requests her savings pot withdrawal. No problem, tax is deducted, admin fee is deducted, she gets paid the balance. But she cannot then come forward in October and say, goodness, I've got a terrible financial emergency, I need some more money. Even if her savings pot is rebuilt to an amount she could take, unfortunately she can't, because SARS have said, no, you took in April 2025, the next time you can take would be in March 2026 through to the next tax year. So the fund will have no option but to do that. Now, all of these issues are in terms of legislation. It's not the trustees, it's not the fund that's setting them, it's the law that set them. And these will apply to all funds in South Africa, which means that we can't bend them because they're law. You can't come forward and say, gee, I really need the 1,500 Rand in my savings pot because I've got a real financial emergency. The answer is unfortunately no, we're simply not allowed to. You can't come forward for that second withdrawal in a tax year because there's a real financial emergency, because again, unfortunately, we're not allowed to. That covers your savings pot. Let's look at your benefit at the 31st of August. And as I said, that will retain all its existing rights. There's no changes to your rights in respect of all the money you've built up in eJoburg up to the 31st of August. And we'll cover this again in a bit more detail in a few slides' time. But we've seen a third of your contributions from September go into your savings pot. What happens to the other 2/3 of those contributions? And this is another part of savings pot that we're not sure everyone has fully understood. That 2/3 of contributions after September will go into what's called your retirement pot, and that will be in a pot that cannot be touched until you retire. So if our member is in the fund, she contributes, and then she resigns in, say, October 2028, and she's got 100,000 Rand in that retirement pot. She can't access it on retirement. She can take all her other money, but that 100,000 Rand has to stay in the retirement system until she retires. Now, she's no longer with eJoburg, so our retirement age of 63 doesn't apply. The statutory retirement age in terms of legislation is a minimum of 55. So she wouldn't be able to retire in principle until age 55 or later, and only at that point could she access that 100,000 Rand. Obviously, it's hopefully grown to more than that in the meantime. It is her money, so you're not losing the money. It's just you can't touch it at that point. So you'll have various options. You could leave it in eJoburg if you think the fund will look after it well for you. You could transfer it to the retirement fund of your new employer. So if you've left the city and you've joined another employer, if they've got a retirement fund, you could take that retirement pot across to the new fund and consolidate it there, which is a fairly good idea. Or if you want to, you can transfer it to either what's called a preservation fund or a retirement annuity fund. Absolutely your choice as the member, but the only issue is you can't take it in cash. And that needs to be quite clear to members, because I think a lot of people are focusing on I can take some of my money in cash now and not realizing there are other conditions that will apply under this two-pot system. Now, you'll note all the way through, government is trying to confuse us all a bit because they've called it the two-pot system, but it actually requires 4 pots, and we'll go through each pot. And each person going forward will have 4 pots. At the moment, if you take a benefit statement off the member portal, or if you get a paper benefit statement, all we really show is your fund credit and all your money is there. So let's say you've got 200,000 Rand in the fund, that 200,000 Rand will all show in your fund credit. Going forward, all that will happen is that money is split into various pots. But if you add the 4 pots together, you'll come back to that same 200,000 Rand. So it's really just splitting it, but all of the money still belongs to you. What are the 4 pots? The first one is what we're going to call the vested lump sum pot. And it probably only applies to about 100 people in the eJoburg fund. So a very small group of people in eJoburg. And within that is 2 categories of members. The first is about 50 people that transferred their benefit from the Soweto City Council Pension Fund several years ago. The Soweto Fund had a very unusual rule, being a pension fund, that members could take their full retirement benefit in cash on retirement if they wanted to. When that money was transferred into eJoburg, it was ring-fenced and kept that same right to be taken in cash on retirement. It grew with investment return. So going into that lump sum pot, it'll keep the same right to be taken in cash on retirement. The second group is about 50 other people that in previous employment were members of a provident fund, and when they transferred their money to eJoburg, that money also had the right to be taken in cash on retirement. And again, that money will be moved on the 31st of August into the vested lump sum pot. And as you probably gathered, when these people get to retirement, any money in their vested lump sum pot can be taken fully in cash. It's kept its existing rights. That's for about 100 people. The fund has roughly 33,200 members. For the 33,100 other people, what will really happen is their fund credit at 31 August 2024 will be moved into what we're calling their vested annuity pot. And that will keep the same rights as it's got at the moment, which is if you retire, you can take 1/3 in cash and 2/3 to buy a pension. If you resign, you can take the full amount in cash. Those rights will stay there, and we'll show that in a bit more detail as well. The only amounts that will come out of those on the 31st of August is the seeding capital, which will go into each person's savings pot. And that was the 10% of your fund credit with a maximum of 33,000 Rand. So that's your existing money at 31 August. What will then happen is you'll have a new pot from the 1st of September called your savings pot. It'll start off with 0 at minute 1. A minute later, that seeding capital will move in, being your 10% of fund credit, maximum of 30,000. And then at the end of each month going forward, 1/3 of your retirement fund contributions after September will go into your savings pot, and then it'll earn investment return on top of that. So it's a new pot that starts on the 1st of September, immediately funded with your seeding capital, and then your ongoing monthly contributions. Also on the 1st of September, another new pot starts with 0, but the other 2/3 of your retirement contributions are from September will go into your retirement pot, earn investment returns, and then that money is in there. But remember, anything that's in your retirement pot, you won't be allowed to take in cash on resignation. It has to stay in the retirement system until you retire. It's your money, it's just sitting there growing for you, and you can access it when you retire at some point in the future. Couple of minor issues there. If those 100 people with a vested lump sum pot and a vested annuity pot, their seeding capital will just be taken pro rata from the 2 pots, as opposed to all from one or the other. But that, as we said, only affects a few people, and we don't spend too much more time on the vested lump sum pot. An important issue is investment return will be applied equally to all 4 pots. So at the moment, if you had a fund credit of 200,000, say, and we earn 10% interest, the interest will be 20,000 and your benefit would become 220,000. If that 200,000 was in the 4 different pots, each pot will earn that same 10% interest, so that when the interest is added to all 4 pots, it'll add up to the 20,000 and you'll be in exactly the same position of a benefit of 220,000. So nobody is prejudiced in terms of having their money in various pots, because each pot will still earn the same amount of interest. Right, so that's pretty much two-pot in words. Let's have a look at it in a picture format. And we'll do it on 2 different times. One is on resignation and the other is on retirement, because that's really when issues become different for two-pot. If you were to unfortunately die, there's no real change to what happens. At the moment, if you were to die, your family would receive your fund credit and the lump sum death benefit provided by the fund. That gets allocated by the trustees to your beneficiaries, depending on their dependency on you and their financial needs, and that will happen. Going forward, if you die, almost exactly the same. Your benefit is the sum of your 4 pots, which is back to your fund credit value, plus the lump sum death benefit. The total of that is distributed by the trustees to your dependents. So no change in the event of a death benefit becoming payable. On resignation, up to the 31st of August, you've got your fund credit in the fund. All your contributions will be going into your fund credit. It's been earning investment return. And if you were to resign, you would be able to take all of that benefit in cash if you wanted to. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can take the full amount in cash. What happens on the 1st of September? Your fund credit will be moved into your vested annuity pot, and it'll retain exactly the same right to be taken in cash on resignation. So no change. Obviously, we'll move your seeding capital out, but the balance of your fund credit keeps all of its existing rights after September. But on the 1st of September, you start this new savings pot. Into your savings pot is that seeding capital and 1/3 of your future contributions. If you resign, you can have it all paid out in cash on resignation. If you do, it's taxed as income, as we saw, the same as a savings pot withdrawal. But if you want to, you can take it in cash. You don't have to. You could transfer it. You could preserve it if you prefer to, but you have the right to take in cash. But we also see there's now a retirement pot into which 2/3 of your contributions after September are allocated, plus investment return. Now, if you resign, you can't take that in cash. It's got to be preserved to retirement in eJoburg, in your new employer fund, in a preservation fund, in a retirement annuity fund, your choice. But the only issue is it can't be taken in cash. If you transfer it to your new employer and resign from your new employer, you still won't be able to take it in cash, because that fund will be required to have exactly the same requirements around any money in your retirement pot must be preserved to retirement. If we look at retirement, we've got the same issue. Up to the 31st of August, we've got our fund credit and all our contributions, plus investment return. And if you retire, because it's a requirement for pension funds, you could take up to a maximum of 1/3 of the benefit in cash, and the balance would have to be used to purchase an annuity from an insurance company of your choice and in a format of your choice. What happens on the 1st of September? Your fund credit, as we saw before, is moved into your vested annuity pot, no further contributions, but if you then retire, exactly the same rights still apply. You can take 1/3 of your vested annuity pot in cash, but you must use the balance of your vested annuity pot to buy an annuity, again of your choice and from a provider of your choice. So you can see all your existing money retains exactly the same rights on retirement or resignation. There's no change. But then we do see that from the 1st of September, we've started the savings pot for you. If you haven't withdrawn it, or if there's money still in your savings pot when you retire, you can take it all in cash on retirement. You have that choice. Because it's a retirement benefit, the tax is actually slightly different, and it's taxed as a retirement benefit and not in terms of your income. So it's slightly more tax efficient if you take it on retirement. What's also happening then is you've got your retirement pot into which we put those further 2/3 of your contributions after September. And if you retire, the full amount in your retirement pot has to be used to purchase an annuity, not the 1/3, 2/3, the full amount. Now that might seem unfair because why not the 1/3, 2/3? But if you look at the vested pot, the green box, that is a 1/3, 2/3. If you put the blue box and the red box together, it's again 1/3, 2/3. So there's no real change in how the total benefit is looked at. It's just they've split it into these 3 different parts rather than keeping it in one part. So you're still able to take 1/3 of your benefit accrued after September in cash and 2/3 to buy an annuity, but all you've now really got the option is to take that 1/3 earlier in time. Previously, you could only take it when you got to retirement. Now you have the right to take that blue pot, the savings pot, at any time you want, even before retirement. And that's really the change that's come through as part of two-pot. There is a slight issue for people with small benefits. Probably won't apply to many people in eJoburg, but it doesn't make sense if you've got a very small benefit. Let's say our member joined at 61 for whatever reason and then retires at 63. He'll only have built up a small amount in the fund. Then it's not sufficient to buy an annuity because it'll buy a very small monthly amount. The expenses will be a large part of what's bought. So the current law says that if your total benefit on retirement is less than 247,500, you can actually take the full amount in cash. The 1/3, 2/3 doesn't apply because it simply wouldn't buy a sufficient annuity. Now, that doesn't work anymore because people are taking some of their benefit early. So what they've done is said, well, look, if your full benefit was 247,500, then 2/3, the portion that had to buy an annuity, is 165,000. 165,000 is exactly 2/3 of 247,500. So they've just changed it wording-wise slightly to say that if the portion you have to use to buy an annuity is less than 165,000, then you may take your full benefit in cash. What is the portion that has to buy an annuity? It's the 2/3 of your vested annuity pot plus your retirement pot. So if it's 2/3 of green plus the full red, then if that's less than 165,000, then you can take the full benefit in cash. Doesn't apply to many people in eJoburg because benefits are much higher than that, especially if you've been in the fund for quite a long time, but it could apply to a small group of people that join at an age that's fairly close to their normal retirement age, or if they early retire. So that in a nutshell is how two-pot works. What I'd like to do, because I think it's complicated and it's new to people, is to try and explain it in a different way, because doing that might make it easier for you to understand. So if we go back to our pots on resignation, the money of the fund is invested with professional asset managers like Alan Gray or Coronation or 91. You've seen a lot of the adverts on TV, and they look after the money and make sure it grows properly. But if you pretend that in fact it's in a bank account, because we all have a bank account and we understand how bank accounts work, it might be easier to follow. So let's pretend that the member's money is all in a bank. Pick any bank you like, let's say Nedbank. So up to the 31st of August, our member's money is all in Nedbank. What are his rights for his Nedbank account? If he resigns from employment, he can take his full Nedbank account in cash. What's going to happen on the 31st of August? Nothing. He'll still keep exactly the same Nedbank account because it doesn't move. It stays in the Nedbank account. What are the rights for his Nedbank account? He can take it fully in cash on resignation. So that money stays there with no change to its rights. But what will happen on September is the fund will open up another bank account for him. Pick any other bank because it's easier to think of different banks. Let's say Capitec. On the 1st of September, the fund will open up a Capitec account for our member, and it's the savings pot. What will go into his Capitec account is his third of contributions going forward plus his seeding capital. Now, the rules for his Capitec account are he can take that money anytime he wants. Obviously subject to those couple of restrictions around only once in a tax year and a minimum of 2,000 Rand. But essentially, if he wants to, he can come forward while he's still working and take any money that's in his Capitec account. It'll be taxed on the admin fee, but he can access that. What will also happen on the 1st of September is we'll open up another bank account for the person, and let's call it ABSA. Now, into that ABSA account will go 2/3 of his contributions after September. And the ABSA account has different rules again. If he resigns from employment, he can't access his ABSA account when he exits employment. That money will have to stay in his ABSA account until he retires. It's his money, his account. No one else can touch it. It's never going to disappear. It'll keep on growing with the return allocated to that ABSA account, but it's simply he can't touch that ABSA account until he gets to retirement. So you can see we've got 3 bank accounts with just different rules of what you can do with the money in those bank accounts. If we look at it on retirement, again, the same thing. We've got the money in what we call the Nedbank account. On retirement, up to 31 August, any money in his Nedbank account, he could take 1/3 of it in cash, up to 1/3, but the balance he had to buy an annuity. What happens on the 1st of September? Nothing. His money stays in that Nedbank account with exactly the same restrictions and rules. He can take up to 1/3 in cash on retirement, but 2/3 of his Nedbank account would have to be used to buy an annuity. So absolutely no change, and you can see all the money up to 31 August is protected. But what happened on the 1st of September, we also opened up the Capitec account for this member, and if he retires, he can, if he wants, take all the money in his Capitec account in cash. On the 1st of September, we also opened up the ABSA account, which is the retirement pot. 2/3 of his future contributions go into it. And what happens on retirement? All of the money in his ABSA account has to be used to purchase a pension or an annuity. So it might be easier to think of it in those terms because we've got all these confusing pots and components and different parts, and it sounds like there's restrictions and things. But if you can think of it simply in terms of 3 different bank accounts, you've got one in each, then it's much easier to follow what the requirements are for the 2-pot. And then obviously the restrictions applied. Previously, if the full amount of money in this case, the Nedbank account was less than 247,500, you could take it all in cash. Under the post 1 September, if 2/3 of the money in the Nedbank account plus all the money in the ABSA account are less than 165,000, then you can take the full amount in cash. Some important issues regarding savings pots. This is not extra money. Some people, I guess we all wish it was true, seem to feel that this is simply extra money that they can simply take and it won't have any impact on their lives, except a good impact now because they've got extra money. But this is you taking your money out of the fund early. So if you take a savings pot withdrawal, it will reduce the amount that you'll be able to take on future resignation or retirement because you've taken it early. And all your savings pot really is, withdrawal is an early withdrawal amounts that you could have taken in cash. It also means you'll be able to take less in cash when you get through. And in the extreme, you may not be able to take anything in cash on retirement. If you think of an employee that's quite new, takes a savings pot withdrawal every time he can, when he gets to retirement, he won't have anything in his savings pot. He'll only have a retirement pot. What is the rule for the retirement pot? It all has to buy an annuity. So that person will then not have anything you can take in cash, will have to use all his money to buy that annuity. So really, when you take this money, just realize what it's doing in terms of your future benefits, and we'll talk to that a bit more as well. Remember, your savings pot withdrawal is taxed as income, and an administration fee of 250 Rand will be deducted. So what's quite important there is if you wanted, say, 15,000 Rand to pay school fees, asking for 15,000 Rand may not be appropriate. Let's say you do have 30,000 in your savings pot, but you only need the 15. If you ask for 15, after tax and the administration fee, you might only get, say, 12,000 Rand. So you almost need to work backwards. If 15,000 Rand is the amount you need to add on allowance for tax and administration fee. You might need to ask for, say, 18,000 Rand to get that 15,000 Rand out after tax and fees. So please be aware of that. Remember that only one amount may be withdrawn in each tax year. So again, if you're going to draw some money early in the tax year, just be aware that if you have another financial issue later in the tax year, you won't be able to withdraw. So I guess the advice, we can't give advice, the thought is don't withdraw it if you don't really need it, because then at a later point when you really do need it, you may not be able to access it until the next tax year. SARS have made this slightly more complicated again. We've seen that you can't take more than one withdrawal in a tax year. And this also applies if you resign after you've taken a withdrawal in the same tax year. It won't be allowed. So let's give an example. Our member came forward in April 2025 and took a savings pot withdrawal. Entitled to, no problem, it got processed and she got paid whatever was in her savings pot. It carries on rebuilding because of the contributions, the third of contributions after that, and her savings pot's got another amount by November 2025. If she were then to resign, even though there's money in her savings pot, she will not be able to take that amount in cash on resignation because she has already taken a withdrawal in that same tax year. And again, it's SARS not wanting to do two full tax directives in the same year. It will have to be preserved in the system. We've seen it's either in the fund, a preservation fund, a new employers fund. She will then be able to come forward in March 2026 because it's a new tax year and take that money. But she will not be able to take it on resignation, which will probably confuse a number of people because they'll be saying, but it's my money, I'm resigning, it's my savings pot, why can't I have it? And the answer is because SARS have put in this rule that you're not allowed two withdrawals in the same year. To complicate it slightly further, if her amount was less than 2,000, if her total savings pot was less than 2,000 when she withdrew, she can in fact take it in cash. So this restriction on withdrawal in the same tax year only applies if the savings pot is more than 2,000 Rand. But it's important to be aware of it because people who resign will be saying, well, I'm resigning for whatever reason, I want all my money. And the answer is, well, no, you can't have your savings pot if you've already taken one in the same tax year, and B, you can't have your retirement pot because that has to be preserved to retirement. So please be aware of that if you are likely to resign at some point in the future. The retirement pot, important issues. In respect of any amounts in your retirement pot, and we'll repeat it again, it can't be taken in cash on resignation. To go through the options again, you can leave it in eJoburg. And that's not the worst option if you think that the trustees will look after it well for you. Fees are low. If the investment returns are good, it's not a bad option. You can transfer it to the retirement fund of your new employer. Let's say you've left Joburg Water to go and work at a new company. If they've got a retirement fund, you can transfer it across to there and it'll be put into your retirement pot in that fund. And that's quite a good option as well, because then all your money is consolidated in one place. You don't have little bits here and there if you move jobs a few times. It's much better to have it consolidated in one place. You also have the option to transfer it to a pension fund, to a preservation fund or a retirement annuity fund, but be aware commissions might be payable to the financial advisor or broker that helps you in doing that. There are no commissions if you leave it in the fund or if you transfer it to your retirement fund of your new employer. So it's really your choice, and you can decide at that time. You can also defer the decision a little bit. Let's say our member had resigned and she didn't have a new job. She could leave it in eJoburg for a period. She gets a new job. That employer has a retirement fund. She can then come back to eJoburg at any point, let's say it's 6 months later, and say to eJoburg, please transfer it now to my new employer. So it's not you're locked in forever if you make that type of decision. So you just need to be aware of that. There is a provision in the Income Tax Act. We don't think too many people will use it, but it's available, that you are allowed to move your vested lump sum pot, your vested annuity pot, and your savings pot into your retirement pot at any time. Why we don't think many people will use it is once you've done that transfer, it has to stay in your retirement pot until you retire. You can't reverse the transfer. So it's in there, you're 35, you've moved the money into your retirement pot, you won't get it and access to it until you retire at some point in the future, depending on what age you retire at. But what is clear is no transfers are allowed from your retirement pot to any other pots. You can't come forward and say, I've got a real financial emergency, and it may be genuine, and I need some of that money transfer from my retirement pot to my savings pot. Unfortunately, in terms of the law, that is simply not allowed, and it is in your retirement pot until retirement. A few important considerations. Some people feel, I've got to take my money in September, otherwise I'm going to lose it, or I'll lose the chance to take it. And as you've seen from the earlier discussion, that's not the case. If you leave it, it'll continue to grow. Your contributions will get added to it going forward, a third of your future retirement contributions. It'll grow with investment return, and you can take it at any point in the future. So you don't have to take it now, because you can take it in 6 months' time, a year's time, 5 years' time, 20 years' time. And whatever's there is your entitlement to take. The only restriction, of course, is you can only take one withdrawal in a tax year. The second misconception is you don't need to take it all. If you say let's say it's built up in that case, and the lady's built up 75,000 in her savings pot, but she only needs 25,000, she doesn't have to take the full 75,000, because she only needs 25,000. She can ask for the 25,000. The balance of 50,000 will stay in her savings pot and continue to grow. And again, if she needs more, she can come back, again, subject to that restriction of only one withdrawal in a tax year. So you don't need to take it all when you do it. So the trustees have asked us, and this is your money. It's absolutely your right to do what you want with it, when you want with it in your savings pot. But their recommendation is you only take a withdrawal to alleviate genuine financial distress, because any amount you take will reduce your future retirement benefit. In this country, approximately 6% of people retire with enough money to retire comfortably, which means most of us don't. And the more you take now means the more likely you are to have insufficient money to live comfortably when you're retired. So the trustees would love you all to retire comfortably, and therefore to keep as much money in the system as possible. And that's why they recommend only take your savings pot if you genuinely need it to alleviate some particular issue. Obviously, if there's a genuine issue around, say, let's say it's a health issue or paying school fees, those are good reasons to take it, but that's what they're asking that you just consider. No restrictions on you. Nobody's going to check while you're taking it, but please think about it before you do. How do you make a savings pot withdrawal? There are going to be two different methods that you can do it, and both of them are pretty much automatic and electronic, and we'll explain what that means. The first is a WhatsApp method, where you'll actually WhatsApp the administrator of your smartphone, and that will trigger the payment to you. Obviously, there's some parts that need to happen there. And the second is you can go onto the member portal, which is on the member website, and there'll be an option there to ask for a withdrawal as well. You can use either method. You can use one this year and the other one later. You're not stuck on which one you use. We've only got about 4,000 people currently registered on the member portal, so we think more people will probably use the WhatsApp method, but we'll cover both of them in quite a lot of detail. So, what is the WhatsApp method? You'll simply send a message to the cell phone number 0719096789. That is the correct number. You're welcome to write it down, but it's also available on the website. And that will start an electronic or conversation with the administrator's computer. You're not sending it to a person, you're sending it to a computer who will then reply to you. And why that's important is the fund's got 33,000 members. If somebody was sitting at the other end of that phone and trying to answer 10 or 20,000, how many people ask for a benefit, it's going to take forever and we won't get paid. So this is all automatic, backwards and forwards between you. Once you've messaged the computer that whatever message you like, you can do hi, you can do hello, you can do whatever you like, but it's essentially simply to open up the conversation. You'll get an automatic response back asking for some of your personal information. And that's so that the administrator can make sure it's actually you that's asking for it. You've heard Andy next to me. Andy's my HR manager. He knows my personal information. So we need to make sure it's you. And what we don't want is Andy coming forward and saying, hi, my name's Howard. Please could I have Howard's money in the fund? So this is all around trying to protect you as the member going forward. You will then provide that information, your ID number, your date of birth, whatever's requested back to that same number, because it's just this conversation backwards and forwards. If that data does not verify, and by verify, we mean if it doesn't match. If it doesn't match the data held by the fund, the process will stop. And that's to protect you and your benefit. Because in this case, it's Andy trying to ask for Howard's money. He doesn't give the right information. So we say stop. If it is actually you and there's a problem, then you'll be referred to a call center at the administrator. They'll be able to help it, sort it out, and then you can restart the process and do it. But it's really important that we don't just carry on and just pay anybody that asks. We need to make sure it's you that's asking for it, because I'm pretty sure you'd be pretty grumpy if we paid your 30,000 Rand or whatever your savings pot amount is to somebody else. You will lose out, which is simply not fair. If that data does verify, so I've put in my request, I've given them the data they want, it matches the data they're holding, they say, great, Howard, how can we help you? And you're going to get various options. And this goes back to one of the issues earlier, is you could ask for what your benefits are, the value of your savings pot, for instance, or you could ask for a savings pot withdrawal. So for that question earlier about how much have I got, then you can look on there and say, oh, it is the 42,000, I can then withdraw it. Or as you can see there, you could ask for a savings pot withdrawal. So let's say I want to do a savings pot withdrawal. I'll WhatsApp back the correct number of that option. Let's say it's option 3, and I will send that in. If I request to withdraw it, it'll come back to me again. And it will say, how much do you want? And it'll give you 3 options. You can either say, I want everything in my savings pot, or you can say, because you only need half of it, I only want 50% of my savings pot, or if in that example earlier, I need 15,000 grossed up to 18,000 to pay school fees, you can put a rand amount in as well. Obviously, if you try and put in a rand amount that's more than you've got in your savings pot, it won't process. If you put in a rand amount that's less than 2,000 Rand, because that's the minimum, it won't process. But you can choose any one of those that you want to suit whatever you're looking for. Then it's going to come back with quite a strange, possibly strange request. It's going to say, please tell us what your annual remuneration is. And why it wants that is because the administrator will have to provide it to SARS so that SARS can estimate the tax payable. And we'll talk to that in quite a lot more detail in a moment. So you will then put in, let's say it's 200,000 Rand as your annual remuneration, you'll put that in and send it back to the WhatsApp number. That's pretty much it. At that point, your request will get processed. The amount less the tax payable and less the 200 administration fee will then get paid to you. Now, by paid to you, it will be paid into your salary bank account. What we mean by your salary bank account is the account into which the employer currently pays your salary every month. And why is that important? Because as I said, Andy runs my payroll. Andy knows my date of birth. He knows my ID number. He knows a lot of things about us. And unfortunately, in this current world, a lot of people know that about us. You try and open up, I don't know, a DSTV account. You have to tell them just about everything about you, including your ID number and your date of birth. So there is still a risk that somebody will try and steal your money. They may be able to clone your cell phone number. So the strongest protection we've got that nobody can steal your money is that even if somebody tries to do that, it will still be paid to you in your salary bank account, because that's where you get your monthly salary. And obviously, if you're not being paid to the right place, then you'd know about it and you'd have sorted that out. You might be a bit surprised that this fraud happens and you suddenly get this money into your bank account, but at least then it can be sorted out and it hasn't been paid to the fraudster. So that is a non-negotiable, that it will be paid there. You can't say, I'm trying to hide it from my wife and I'd rather use something else that she doesn't know about, or I owe my brother money and I want to pay it directly to him. That simply won't be allowed. It must go into your salary bank account. If you want to do whatever after that, you're welcome to from that account. And that is very clearly to protect you and make sure nobody else can get their hands on your money. Once all of the money is paid in, the system will send you an SMS to say the amount has been paid into your bank account, so you know it's happened. You can then check it's there and use it as you wish. So quite an automated process. You'll see there's no human involvement in this. And that's really important because of the number of people that might come forward, especially quite early on, to make sure that there aren't big delays in the process. In terms of this WhatsApp method, the number that was on the previous slide is already active. It is the correct number, and you're welcome to phone it in the meantime if you want to. And we've had a couple of members that have tried, and it's worked. But prior to 1 September, it will only give you the options to find out what your benefits are. It will not give you the option to ask for a savings pot withdrawal, because that option is only allowed from 1 September. Now, it's not a bad idea to do it, because if you're not sure, we can verify your data. If you try it, if it verifies, you know everything's fine. And if you want to do a savings pot withdrawal in the future, you know there shouldn't be a problem. If you try it and it doesn't verify, then you know there's a problem with your data. You can sort that out. So if and when you want to do a withdrawal, there shouldn't be a problem. So there's no reason not to do it. It might be useful if you're not quite sure how much you've got in the fund to find out how much you've got in the fund, which will give you an estimate of what that savings pot initial amount of seeding capital will be, because you can do that 10% calculation, maximum of 30,000. So you're welcome to try it if you want. But the option to request a savings pot withdrawal will only be switched on from the 1st of September. So you'll only be able to start asking for a savings pot withdrawal if you need it from 1 September onwards. There will also be this dedicated two-pot call center, the administrator, to answer any questions, to sort out any problems, and that's literally going to be two-pot related. Again, given the number of people, there might be quite a lot of pressure on those call centers, but we're hoping that presentations like this will help people understand what's happening, the systems will work, and hopefully there won't be too many people that need to phone. What is the other method? So I hope you're aware that the fund has set up its own dedicated website. It's at eJoburg.retirementfund.co.za. Even if you're not worried about two-pot, there's some really useful information there we think that members should see. There are counselling documents explaining all the benefits, retirement, resignation, disability we spoke about earlier, death. There's a member benefit guide that you can see, which covers just about everything. There's a copy of the rules. There's the history of investment returns. There's fund newsletters. So all of that is there as general information, which would be quite useful if you're interested in any of it. If you, in the case earlier, somebody's getting disabled, there's information there that could be found. If you're considering resigning at any time, that information is there. If you're close to retirement age, there's information there as well. So please, if you have any interest, look at that website. If there's feedback, you're obviously welcome to give it to us. On the homepage of the website, we've put in quite a lot of two-part information. There's a two-page counselling doc or two-page information document that has got all of this information that we're covering in now. So if you want to look through it again, you're obviously welcome to do that. There's a link to these presentations. Obviously, you've found the link somewhere, but if other people want to go to the remaining presentations, is there. But also on the home page, on the top right-hand corner, is a red button for member login. If you haven't logged in previously, then you need to register for the first time, and there's another button for that and the explanation of what to do. It's like any other type of registration. You'll choose a username and a password, and then you can just log in the future and go straight through. But if you've registered and log in, it will, from the 1st of September, give you an option to ask for a savings pot payment, and you may be required to provide some of the information, probably less because you've previously registered and provided some of that information. Then the process will be pretty much the same. It'll come back and ask you which option do you want, all or a percentage or a round amount of your savings pot. You'll select that. It'll ask you to provide your annual remuneration so that SARS can do the estimate of the tax payable. And then again, your request will get processed and tax deducted, $250 administration fee deducted, and the balance paid into your salary bank account. Again, no option, it will go into your salary bank account. Because you've gone in through the portal, it's got a slightly different approach. You can either choose an SMS or email notification to let you know once that payment has been made. So a very similar process. And again, no human involvement, just so that the process is as quick as possible. So those are the two options. And sorry, I can't remember your name, but I'm hoping that answers your first question of how you make a withdrawal. There's no paper forms, there's no forms that you fill in or have to deliver or try and get your HR to do it. But you'll see in this basis, you're not going to HR at all. You're going straight onto the WhatsApp, through to the administrator, or straight through the portal to the administrator. Because if we asked each of you go to HR and fill in forms, then it could take a long time, just given the volume of people, and the HR people have obviously got their own work to do as well. Now, the tax based on taxable income. As we've said, the Income Tax Act requires that tax be deducted as though this is additional income to you. And that's additional income in this tax year. The tax year that you actually request the payment. So if you ask for it in October, it's in the tax year ending February 2025. If you ask for it in May next year, then it'll be in the tax year ending February 2026. SARS have confirmed that if you want a savings pot withdrawal, you will need to provide this estimate of your annual remuneration for the current tax year. So that's a requirement from SARS that you provide this information. Now, it is difficult to know what your annual remuneration is. Most of us know exactly what our take-home pay is. We kind of have a feel for our gross income, but they're asking for what they call annual remuneration. That's the one part. The other part is they're looking for it for the year, if our withdrawal is now, from 1 March 2024 through to 28 February 2025. But hang on, some of those months are in the future. I don't know what I'm even going to get in the next 5 months. At the moment, it's not too bad because your salary increases in July. So hopefully for most people, it won't change between now and February. But for some people, let's say you ask for this amount in April 2026, you won't necessarily know what your increase is going to be on the 1st of July 2026. So you'd have to guess a salary increase. If any people are on a bonus system, you'd need to try to estimate what those bonuses are. A lot of people on an overtime basis or shift basis, that can change their salary quite materially from month to month. So it's not easy to accurately work out what your annual remuneration is. You may be able to get a good feel for it if you take your latest pay slip, see what those numbers are, and multiply by 12 because it's monthly and get it to annual. That might be a number you can use. But what will happen pretty much for all of us is that estimate will probably be too high or too low. And that means there'll be a SARS reconciliation at the end of the tax year. So I've put in my estimate, it's 200,000 Rand. It turns out it was too high or it turns out it was too low. Doesn't matter, we'll look at both scenarios. SARS have got that, they look at it and they say, oh, that means deduct 20% tax based on the 200,000 I gave through. They will give a directive to the administrator to deduct 20% tax, and the administrator will take that 20% off my savings pot withdrawal, pay the 20% to SARS, take off the administration fee, pay me the balance. Now, if at the end of the year, when SARS look at my annual tax return and they say, well, hang on, we thought 20% at the time, but it should have been 18%, they've taken off too much tax. 20% less 18%, they took 2% too much. Let's make it easy. My savings pot withdrawal was 20,000 Rand. So 2% of 20,000 Rand is 400 Rand. They have taken 400 Rand too much in tax, and I will get 400 Rand back from SARS at the end of the year. And that's obviously not too much of a problem. If it's the other way around, and that 20% was too low because the 200,000 was an underestimate, and they say, well, hang on, it should have been 22%, then I owe SARS that 2% of tax. 2%, 20,000, 400 Rand, I will have to pay an additional 400 Rand of tax to SARS at the end of the tax year. Now, that is between the member and SARS. It's not through the fund, it's not through your employer, because this is SARS at the end of the year truing up your tax that you've paid over the year and saying there's a rebate or an amount due. Now, this will probably happen for everyone because it's very unlikely you'll be able to get your tax exactly right. So we're all going to probably end up with a rebate or a small payment at the end of the year. There's some doubt on how this is going to happen, but if SARS change their minds, we don't think so because we're now 3 weeks off D-Day. Then we'll let people know through the newsletters and through the website. But as it stands at the moment, this is what's going to happen, and we'll all have that tax issue at the end of the year. What tax might get taken off? Obviously, we can't tell you because it depends on your income. It depends on you as an individual. We're all different. What we can provide is the current tax rates. So the personal tax rates for this current tax year, the year ending February 2025, are as on the screen. If you're under 95,750 as your annual taxable income, no tax is payable. The maximum tax rate, if you earn more than 1.817 million, is 45%. So all we can tell you with certainty is the tax rate will be somewhere between 0% and 45%, depending on your income. If you want to get a feel for it, let's say your income was 350,000. If you look at that table, that probably means your tax rate is going to be around 24, 25%. And you can get a good feel for it that way. If your taxable income was 200,000, then it's probably going to be less than 18%. And you can get a feel for that. We do understand, and again, SARS haven't finalized this, that they may apply a minimum rate of 18%. So even if you're below that taxable rate of 95,750, they'll apply the 18%, and then you get a tax rebate at the end of the year. So that probably means the tax that's deducted will be somewhere between 18% and 45%, because if they apply that minimum of 18, then those people will get a rebate. So Please be aware that you'll pay tax if you take a withdrawal, but at the end of the tax year, you may get some of that tax back, and you may have to pay a little bit more tax to SARS as well, depending on whether that estimate of annual remuneration was too high or too low. Right, that's what happens. Now, this is the other really important part, is how do we make sure it's you that actually puts forward a request and is not somebody else trying to steal your money? Every month, your employer takes the contributions off your salary towards the fund and also puts in the employer contributions on your behalf. Let's say you work at Joburg Water, and Joburg Water then pays, pick a number, 2 million rand to the fund. That's great, but it doesn't help us because who does the 2 million rand belong to? So what Joburg Water also does is sends a schedule to the fund saying, these are the people that work at Joburg Water, and here's the contribution for each one of them. So there'll be an Excel spreadsheet, and then we'll have all the names, and next to it will be the member contributions and employer contributions. And if you add all of those up, it'll come back to the 2 million. The fund then knows how to allocate that 2 million inside the fund. So Howard's contributions go to Howard and Andy's contributions go to Andy. Also on that schedule, because they're required to do in terms of the law, will be other personal information. So it won't just say Howard, it'll show my SAP number, it'll show my date of birth, my ID number, my tax number, my cell phone number, my email address, and my residential address. So quite a lot of other information has to be provided by your employer to the fund every month. That is then the information that will be used to verify that it's you that's come forward asking for your money. So when you put it forward from a cell phone number, whatever number it is, the computer will check, is that cell phone number the one we've got on record for you? If it is, it'll verify. If it's not, it fails. And then when it's asked for your ID number and those other data, if it all verifies, it goes forward. But if somebody comes forward and puts a different ID number forward and it doesn't match, then it won't verify. So every month, we've got this data provided by your employer to the fund. It's on this monthly contribution file, and it must be correct and complete. If it's not, you will not be allowed to take a savings pot withdrawal, and that's to protect you. It's not to punish you. It's to make sure we don't pay your money to somebody else, because that's the worst possible outcome. Some of the data we got there is your surname and initials. We got that for everyone. We've got a date of birth for everyone. We've got an ID number for just about everyone. There were a few missing and a couple that weren't right. Those are being queried with the employers, and they've been asked to put forward the correct ones. We've got just about everybody tax numbers. There are about 175 people where we didn't have their tax numbers. And again, those employers have been asked to talk to the members and say, your tax number is not on record, please provide it so we can pass it across to the fund. And by we, this is the administrator doing this work. But what does worry us is that for about a third of the membership, 11,000 out of 33,000, the fund has not received their cell phone numbers. And it's understandable why. We all get so much spam and people trying to sell us stuff and people trying to get hold of our money, send us all sorts of stuff we don't need, that I personally don't like giving my cell phone number to anybody if I can help it. And obviously a lot of people feel similarly to what I do. The issue though is if the fund does not have your cell phone number, you will not be able to take a savings pot withdrawal because the fund will not be able to check it's you asking for that savings pot withdrawal. You could possibly try going in through the member portal, which might be possible again, but again, it has to match and verify your data. To repeat, it's critically important we can check it's you and not someone else trying to take your money. This world is getting worse and worse in the sense of there's more and more fraud, there's more and more cybercrime. It's a real risk going forward. So the fund just has to be really careful to make sure that somebody doesn't do the wrong thing and try and take it. Therefore, your data must match when you come forward and ask for a payment. It must match the data held by the fund. If we don't have your income tax number, then the fund can't ask for a tax directive from SARS. If the fund can't get a tax directive, it can't make a payment. So if your tax number is incorrect or missing, then you will not be able to get a tax directive. Obviously, if that data is provided, then you can restart the process. And then importantly, to make sure your money doesn't get paid to somebody else, when a request comes forward, it will be paid into your salary bank account. And again, that is part of the information that the employer is passing across to the fund on a monthly basis on that contribution schedule. So we've seen things like ID number, date of birth, cell phone number, and your salary bank account details are passed across by your employer to the fund so that if you request a payment, it will be paid into that bank account. If you want a different bank account, then you'll need to change that with your employer. Once it comes through the fund, it can go into that account. But whichever one is on record with your employer for your salary will be used for your savings pot payment if you request one. So if you think your data is incorrect, for instance, you had a cell phone number and you've changed it, so the one your employer's got is no longer the correct one, then you need to change it because it won't match if you come forward for a savings pot withdrawal. If you think any of your other data is wrong, you need to make sure it's corrected. If you don't think your cell phone number's with the employer, then it won't be with the fund and you won't be able to take a savings pot payment. All of this is quite urgent because the August contribution file really gets sorted out with the payroll system, which closes in mid-August for the employer to give that file to the fund at the end of August. So if you don't do it in August, if it's not there, and you only do it in, say, October, it'll come through at the end of the October month on the payroll file onto the fund systems in early November. You won't be able to take a savings pot withdrawal until November. Certainly by using the WhatsApp method, you may be able to do it by using the member portal method. Now, you can't do it directly with the fund. You can't say, oh, you haven't got my cell phone number, and phone up the fund and say, hey, it's Howard, here's my cell phone number. Because the fund cannot prove it's Howard making that call and not the fraudster just doing that on Howard's behalf. It's Andy come forward and says, hey, yes, my name's Howard, here's Andy's cell phone number, and then he can put in that request. So any data update has to be done with your employer. Because your employer has a formal process, you have to fill in a form, they verify it's you, they sign that form off and it gets stamped or whatever process they follow, and only once that's clearly your data will it be uploaded onto the employer's payroll system or database, and then the employer will pass that across to the fund on the next contribution file. So please don't phone the fund and say, you haven't got my cell phone number, here it is, because that won't be processed. It has to be through your employer. If you're unsure if your data is there, you can try checking with your HR department and say, look, I got a new cell phone 6 months ago, not sure if I told you. Please can you just check that this is the number you've got on record? If it is, great. If it's not, then you can fill in the forms and get them to update your data. This does coincide and might confuse in terms of a separate exercise which coincidentally the employers are doing at the moment, where they're verifying the data of all employees to update their records anyway. So if you've been through that process and you provided the information, it probably means everything's there. Don't necessarily wait for that process, because for some of the big employers, we understand it's only scheduled to finish in January or February 2025. If your data only comes through at that point, then it'll only get to the fund after that, shortly thereafter, and you won't be able to take a savings pot withdrawal until the data's there. So if you think your data is missing and you want to take a withdrawal fairly shortly, please obviously make sure your data's with your employer. On top of that, benefit statements, which are done once a year at the fund's year end, which is 30 June, are normally sent out to members and probably October, November each year. That doesn't help this year because obviously we need it now. So the administrator has already prepared the 30 June 2024 benefit statements and put on them your personal details, including your tax number, your ID number, and all these other issues. Not your bank account details. We don't want other people seeing those, and we've got them already, but the data that you need to make sure is correct. And those benefit statements have been printed, and they should be with your employers this week for your employers to then pass on to you. If you get your benefit statement, please then check to see if your data is correct or if your data is missing. Obviously, if the line item of cell phone is blank, it means we don't have your cell phone, and you then need to get that cell phone through your employer to the fund. If you see it there and the cell phone number is wrong, same result, please check it's correct, or please get it corrected with your employer. If you don't get your benefit statements in the next week or so, please then start asking your HR department, where's my benefit statement, because it doesn't help if they're not distributed quickly because somebody's away or for whatever reason they're not passed on to members quickly. So they should be with your HR departments within the next few days. Hopefully then, and they've been asked to do it, they'll get distributed to you as soon as possible. And really that should be within a further week. A newsletter's gone out, and hopefully you've had sight of it, where we try to highlight this importance of your data and how important it is for the data to be correct, or you will not be permitted to take a savings pot payment. So that's really one of the important messages tonight, is to make sure that your data is correct and can verify or match against what's held by the fund, which then allows the fund to process any savings pot withdrawal that you may request. Probably repeating a few issues, but let's look at savings pot payments. The fund will then ask for a directive from SARS around how much you've requested from your savings pot. It'll be treated as income. It's taxed as though it's essentially a salary payment. That tax rate will be different for everybody, but as we said, it's probably between 0 and 45%, possibly between 18 and 45% if SARS apply a minimum rate of 18%. As we said, it could either result in a rebate or a further tax payment, because it's unlikely to be exactly correct, and at the end of the year SARS will redo the tax calculation based on actual numbers then, because by then your actual remuneration will be known. They'll work it all out and say you paid too much tax on your savings pot, here's some back, or you didn't pay enough tax on your savings pot, please pay a further amount directly to SARS. The administration fee of 250 Rand will be deducted from your payment, and you'll get the balance. Then, to answer one of the other questions from the Q&A, or was one of the three-part question, is this is not an ATM withdrawal. You're not going to be able to, on Tuesday morning, say, I'd like my savings pot, and it'll be in your bank account on Tuesday afternoon as though it was a savings pot withdrawal. And the reason for that is there's a lot of processing that needs to happen. There's the verification to check it's you. The fund doesn't know how many people are going to come forward every day and ask for money. Some days it might be nobody, some days it might be a lot of people. So what they have to do is to get those on a day, total them up and see how much it is. Let's say it's on a particular Tuesday, the total they require is 4 million Rand for a number of people. The money is not in a bank account. It's with the asset managers or investment managers to get a good return. So the fund will have to go to this asset manager and say, please give us 4 million Rand of cash so we can make these savings pot withdrawals. And that disinvestment process takes a little bit of time to process as well. There's obviously the tax directive process and the whole processing. So the administrator estimates is probably going to take about 15 working days from when you request a savings pot withdrawal to when that money will be in your bank account. Obviously, if it can be quicker, it will be quicker. So probably up to about 15 days, hopefully quicker than 15 days. In the initial period, we just don't know how many people are going to come forward in September and October to ask for a withdrawal, so the pressure of volumes might take longer than 15 days. But probably our biggest concern is SARS. We just don't know if they're going to be able to process the number of people that come forward. We've got 33,000 members on eJoburg. We don't know, but let's say 10,000 come forward quite soon. That's a lot of people. But the administrator Momentum's got 500,000 people on across all the funds they administer. So that's not 10,000 they're dealing with. It might be 150,000 they're dealing with. That's a lot of pressure on their systems. But when you look at SARS, they're dealing with everybody in South Africa. And if 3 or 4 million people come forward at the same time, we're not sure that the SARS system will cope with that, and it might fall over. If it falls over, there's no guarantee as when they'll get back up and running and when they'll be able to provide the tax directives. So a lot hinges on SARS getting it right, and the fund and the trustees obviously have no control over SARS. So the fund can't promise how long it will take. They expect up to about 15 days, but if things go wrong, potentially at SARS, then it will take longer. We will, if we can find out, then post messages on the website in the breaking news section. If we've got time, we'll try and get out a newsletter. We may be able to send out a WhatsApp message, so at least we can try and help members understand if those delays are happening. But please don't expect the money is going to be in your bank account immediately, because there will be a process. Even if everything goes really well, it's still going to take longer than a week because of the tax, the disinvestment issues. So please rather expect about 3 weeks. And if it's faster than that, then that's good news. It's also part of the reason you'll get that SMS notification, so you don't have to go and check every day. You'll get that notification once it's been paid, so you know it's been received, and you can go and check your bank account and use the money as you wish. As we've noted, your savings pot payment will go into your salary bank account to prevent anyone else from fraudulently getting hold of that money. An example. So let's say our member has 30,000 Rand in her savings pot, just for an easy number, and she actually asks for all of it. The administrator processes that, puts in a directive request to SARS, and SARS come back and say 25% tax. What does that mean? So she's requested 30,000, sorry. The administration fee gets deducted of about 250 Rand. Now, as it stands today, SARS will tax the amount excluding the administration fee. So the 25% will apply on 29,750 Rand, the 30,000 less the 250 Rand. That 25% tax comes out at 7,437 and 50 cents. So once you've taken the 30,000, deduct the 250, deducted the tax, that member will get 22,312 Rand and 50 cents paid into her bank account. To be clear, SARS keep on changing their mind on this. This is their current position. At one point, they say it's the amount after the deduction of the administration fee. Then they change the amount before the administration fee. But this is the current position. So I think you can pretty much rely on the fact that it'll be your total less the administration fee that'll be subject to tax. Will this go well? In most cases, yes. But in a number of cases, there might be, if you put in a savings pot request to withdraw an amount of money, it might get refused. And why? Well, if the verification process fails because they can't verify and match your member details, your cell phone numbers, your ID numbers, etc., then it will fail. And that's fair and reasonable because you don't want your money paid to somebody else. If it is actually you, you'll contact the call center, you'll find out what the problem is. If they don't tell you directly, you can sort it out and then you can resubmit that request. So, but in that circumstance, it would be refused. If your tax number is incorrect or missing, then SARS will not issue a directive, and then the administrator can't process your request, so it will fail. Obviously, once you provide that or correct that tax number, then it will you can resubmit and it'll get sorted out. If your tax affairs are not up to date with SARS, so if, for instance, you haven't done your tax or you've been fighting with SARS for the last 3 years, SARS may quite reasonably say, well, until you sort your tax affairs out, Mr. Member, we're not going to issue a directive. If that is the case, then no directive, the fund can't make a payment. So if your tax affairs aren't up to date, please be aware that SARS might refuse to do a tax directive and you won't get a payment. Equally, if you owe money to SARS, the law says that SARS can tell the fund to pay that directly on your behalf. So if in that previous example, our lady owed SARS 20,000 Rand, let's jump back up to it, SARS will issue 2 directives to the fund. 1, deduct the 7,437 Rand and 50 cents from the benefit and pay it to SARS, and 2, deduct a further 20,000 Rand because our member owes SARS 20,000 Rand, and what our lady in this scenario will get is simply 2,312 Rand and 50 cents because the fund is required to pay that amount to SARS directly. So if you owe SARS money, please be aware that SARS has the right to issue a directive against this to say that money must be taken off your savings pot as well. It doesn't apply to many people, but if you are one of those people, please be aware of it. If you request less than 2,000 Rand, or if there is less than 2,000 Rand in your savings pot, your request will be refused because remember the minimum amount you can request of a savings pot withdrawal is 2,000 Rand. If you've already requested a savings pot withdrawal in that tax year and then you request a second one, it will be refused because remember you can only request one amount in a particular tax year. So those are the circumstances that your request might be refused. In some of them, if you sort the issue out, then you can reapply. Obviously, if it's less than 2,000 Rand, you simply let your savings pot build up to more than 2,000 and then you can come forward again. If it's a second payment in a year, you'll simply have to wait till the next tax year, then you can come forward again, and it's the new tax year, you can make another request. There are also a couple of scenarios where your request might get delayed. The first is if the fund is aware of any divorce or maintenance orders that you're involved in, then the law requires the fund to check that there's enough money in your benefits to honor those divorce or maintenance orders before paying you your savings pot withdrawal. And that's to protect the spouse in the case of divorce, presumably children in the case of a maintenance order, that they're looked after in terms of the order. It doesn't stop it, but it does become a bit of a manual process because the fund will then have to look in and check to see whether those orders can be complied with. If they can, and there's enough money, then the payment will go forward. If they check and there's not enough money, then they will write back to you and say, sorry, you can't actually do it because we have to first make sure there's enough money for the divorce or maintenance orders. So please be aware of that one. And the second one we've covered already is if there are a large number of withdrawals in a short space of time, we just don't know what the pressures will do in terms of payment. It won't fail the process, but it might just slow down the process. That'll take a bit longer for everyone to get paid. So please just be aware of that. And remember, this is very new for everybody, not only for you as members, but even for the administrators and SARS. They're also trying to make sure they get everything right. And we hope all their systems and their processes are in order so they can do that. Only a couple more slides. Further communication. There is this 2-page summary document that's quite useful. You've kindly sat through this presentation, but most of this information is on that 2-page document. If you attend the in-person member presentations, and the trustees have authorised 100 in-person member presentations spread across all of the employers, hopefully on different times and dates, you're welcome to go those as well. If you do, copies of the 2-page summary document are there. You're also welcome to take more than 1 or 2 so you can pass them on to your colleagues so they're also aware of it. The 2-page document is on the home page and the 2-pot page of the fund's website, so you're welcome to view it there. A copy will be included with your benefit statement, so hopefully you'll receive that shortly and you'll get a copy there. And if you still haven't got one, you're welcome to approach your HR, because it has been emailed to all HR departments. As we've said, the 30 June 2024 benefit statements have been printed. They're in the process of being distributed to the employers, and hopefully you should get them within a week to 10 days. And there's the communication document there. The summary document was also included with the fund's newsletter. If new issues comes up, if we get a lot of frequent questions that would be interesting to everybody, then the fund will put out a quick newsletter to everyone to help them with that information. As I've said, there's the fund website at eJoburg All of this information and a lot of other useful fund information is available on that website and will hopefully be useful. And then finally, we've got these member webinars. This is about the 5th in a series of 8. If you want to, you're always welcome to come back and visit it again. If you know other people that would like the information, please point them in the right direction, because the more people we can give this information to, hopefully the less concerns and the less confusions happen. I'm assuming you know when they are because you've managed to get to this one, but essentially that's the list of the 8 webinars. Not quite sure how you joined, but the easiest way is on the homepage of the fund's website is a link to each of these webinars. Obviously you come on, you register, it gives you the email, and then you can join. So just in summary, this is quite a useful page if you're interested of the whole of the two-pot system that puts everything onto one page. Essentially down the left-hand side, we've got the 4 different pots: the lump sum pot, the annuity pot, the savings pot, and the retirement pot. The first column of inflows shows the money that will go into those various pots. So our vested pot is our lump sum money that can be taken in cash at retirement, less a bit of the seeding capital. Into the vested annuity pot is pretty much everybody in their fund, their full fund credit at the end of August, less their seeding capital. Savings pot is their seeding capital and 1/3 of retirement funding contributions after September, and retirement pot is 2/3 of retirement contributions after September. So that's what goes in. The last 3 columns are how much you can take out of each one under different circumstances. So the middle column, cash payment during employment, is when you can take money without leaving the fund, and as you'd expect, you can't take your lump sum pot, you can't take your vested annuity pot, you can't take your retirement pot. The only thing you can take is your savings pot without leaving employment and subject to that minimum of 2,000 Rand. The next column is resignation. What can you take in cash on resignation? You can take your vested lump sum pot, no change, in cash on resignation, your vested annuity pot in cash, and your savings pot in cash. So the only one that has restrictions is your retirement pot, which must be preserved to retirement. And then finally, probably the most complex of them all is the retirement. What happens on retirement? Your vested lump sum pot, no change. You could take that all in cash. Your vested annuity pot, which applies to most people, up to 1/3 in cash. The balance to purchase an annuity, no change from the current position. Our new pot, a savings pot, may be taken in cash, but the retirement pot must be used to purchase a pension. So it's quite a useful summary of all the pots from the 1st of September.